And a very good evening to you, and welcome to Politics 101 on a Monday evening. If you're joining us from Guyana and the wider Caribbean, if you're joining us from North America, a very good evening to you. You're joining us from further afield in Europe, it will be good night. Some places it will be good morning. A good evening, a good morning, good night to all of you. Welcome to Politics 101. Please, of course, share the link and let everyone know we're on tonight on a Monday night. Good evening, good evening. Hello to all of you in Guyana. It was election day today. The polls are closed. Local government election. The polls are closed. Good evening, Linda, who's joining us from of course, New Jersey. Those of you who are in New York, welcome to Politics 101. Brooklyn, Queens, the Bronx. If you are in Washington, D.C., Maryland area, Virginia, welcome to Politics 101. Hello to all of you in on the West Coast, California, Arizona, all the way out there. Those of you in the Midwest, some of you join us from, of course, Chicago. And how about all of you down there in the south of the United States of America, particularly those of you in Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia, South Carolina. Some of you join us from North Carolina and Virginia. Welcome to Politics 101. It's Monday night, Monday evening. The polls are closed. Polls are closed. Of course, those people who are still in the line, they will have to be processed. So although the polls closed at 6, if people were in the line at 6 o'clock, they would, of course, be allowed to vote. I've not been getting a lot of feedback today about what took place. I'm anticipating a higher than normal turnout in the municipalities, Georgetown, Linden, New Amsterdam, Bartica, etc. My sense is that there was a late surge of interest on the part of the APNU supporters. Local government elections are not high turnout elections. I think the last time it was somewhere between 30 and 35%. I'm hearing some low figures in the rural areas. I'm hearing some low turnout there in the rural areas. But I'm anticipating that in places like Linden and Georgetown, you're going to get at least the normal turnout of 30 to 35% and perhaps higher than that. Welcome, of course, to Politics 101. Thank you all for joining us this evening. We are now going to await the results of the election. There, of course, there's been a lot of interest in the election. As you know, a lot of interest in the election. We don't know whether the turnout is going to match the interest in the election. What was clear about this, local government elections are generally symbolic. I can say that the polls are closed. They're generally symbolic because we have a system whereby the central government controls the purse string. So in a sense, the local governments are dependent on central government for most of their funding. Of course, they are empowered to collect taxes, property taxes, businesses are supposed to pay taxes, but from what we are hearing, businesses don't necessarily pay taxes at a very heavy rate. Um, the Lord Mayor of Georgetown, outgoing Mayor of Georgetown, did indicate that the government owed Georgetown almost $1 billion. That's staggering because the governing party is trying to get control of Georgetown, a city that you owe $1 billion, owned in Guyana. So these elections are basically symbolic because, especially in areas where the opposition party or parties control the government, is going to starve them of funds. And so, therefore, they're not going to be able to deliver the services for their people. But yet, these elections are important. They are important. They're symbolic, but they are important. They are important because you're talking about political turf. You're talking about political turf. And the PNC/APNU would have said very clearly that they are contesting the election to defend their political turf, especially in the municipalities, the urban areas. The big four, of course, are Georgetown, Linden, New Amsterdam, and Bartica, to defend their territory. Because if the PPP were to get control of those four, or any combination, any one or two of those four, it will reflect the further dominance of the PPP. And that is what they're about. We've been saying that over and over again. They want to dominate every aspect of government. And we know they already dominate the central government. They dominate the executive and the parliament, the legislative branch. They influence the court through bullying and all of those other things. And those are the three branches of government, central government. So they in effect control the central government. And so if they were to get control of these big municipalities, it will reflect an almost total takeover of the levers of government. And so therefore, while the local government elections were symbolic, they are nevertheless important in the context of Guyana. So these local government elections, I'm arguing, were about two things, and they're related. They were about the PPP continuing its quest for total control of the society, total domination of the institutions of power in the society. But the method by which they went about that in the local government election is interesting. I am arguing that these elections were principally about African Guyanese, Black people. Nobody was contesting the Indian vote. The PPP didn't have to defend its territory because the APNU did not contest in most of the PPP strongholds. And where they contested in NDCs, for example, that include PPP villages or Indian Guyanese villages, they did not do too much of campaigning in the Indian Guyanese villages. The APNU campaigned, for the most part, in its stronghold, the African Guyanese communities. And since the PPP did not have to defend its constituency, it did little campaigning among East Indians. The PPP spent a lot of its time campaigning in African Guyanese areas. And the PNC spent a lot of its time campaigning in the African Guyanese areas. These elections were about African Guyanese. David Hinds is going to say it, because you all know the rest ain't going to say it. They're going to say it was in the, PNC strongholds. These elections were about African Guyanese, were about race. And they're not going to say it, and I'm going to say it. The PPP did not spend time campaigning in its constituency. It didn't have to, because it was not challenged in those constituencies. It spent its time in African Guyanese communities. And the PNC, in turn, did not challenge the PPP in their areas. They spent their time defending, and I'm saying that deliberately, defending their own territory. And so these elections were about African Guyanese. But if you came from outside of Guyana and you check our press, our media, you would not believe that is what it was. You would say, oh, it's a normal local government election. No, it was about Black people. It's about one party trying to get control of Black people, and another party belatedly trying to retain control of Black people, Black communities. That is what it was about. You all can take that to the bank and you'll make money off of it. These elections were about Black people. That's why the PPP don't want people like me to talk, because they don't want us to let this open secret out. And why would the PPP want to control Black people? The PPP wants to control Black people because its master plan is to ensure political and ethno-racial dominance of Guyana in an age of oil wealth. That is, in an ethnically divided society where the ethnic groups are competing against each other. The grand plan of the PPP is to maintain political control of the country so that it is able to distribute the economic resources in a biased way towards its political and ethnic constituencies. And for the most part, its political and ethnic constituencies are one and the same. So what does Black people have to do with that? In any ethnic society where you divide the bread unequally, the ethnic group that gets less than its deserve is likely to challenge you. It's likely to erupt. It's likely to protest. It's likely to resist. It's likely to make the country unstable because they are not getting. So what's the PPP's plan? Give them a little. Give them a little so that they believe that they're getting. And once they believe they're getting, they're not going to rise up against you. They're not going to resist you. They're not going to make the country unstable. And you will be able to carry out your grand plan without any resistance. That's where Black people came in. That's why the PPP is targeting Black people. The targeting Black people is to neutralize them. Not to empower them, to neutralize them. And what they've figured out is if people got nothing and you give them a little, not all of them, but enough of them will say, well, I don't have, and these people giving me. And they're either going to follow you or follow them. They're either going to follow them or they're going to remain quiet. That's the grand plan of the PPP. The PPP is using race as a means of furthering its stranglehold on Guyana. It knows that the East Indian community is not going to challenge it for ethnic loyalty reasons. Indian Guyanese are ethnically loyal to the PPP. They may be vexed with the PPP, but they figure that they're likely to get more from the PPP than they will get from the PNC. So they are going to take their little and they're going to remain quiet or supportive of the PPP. So the PPP has East Indians down. And so therefore is how to get Black people to be quiet. How do you control them so that they do not challenge what you are doing? And the PPP has come up with this framework that you go into the African Guyanese community and you read enough of them. First of all, you challenge those who you think are quote unquote leaders in the community, whether they're political leaders or business leaders. So you go for the business people, you go for those who may have influence in the community as leaders, you go after them. So when you see a lot of young, bright Black people, some of them are business people, on the PPP bandwagon, they were targeted because they're vulnerable. They're into business. You know, they may be running a sports club in the community. And if they're into business, they're looking for more business opportunities. And since Guyana is not an economically democratic society where business opportunities come your way regardless of your ethnicity, the PPP will say to them, well, look, you know, you're on the wrong side. You're not going to get business opportunities. But if you come on my side, you're going to get some business opportunities. I look at a former cricketer, I think, former cricketer. He's one of the candidates to the PPP. I think he's a businessman now. And he said that, you know, words to the effect that they said I'm a soup drinker, but the soup is nice. And if you see the boy, soup is nice. The PPP targeted that group in the Black community, group of mostly young entrepreneurs, and give them the promise of more opportunities. So it targeted them, business leaders, other leaders in the community, some political people who were with the PNC. They targeted them. And then they went to the vulnerable, the next vulnerable group, that's poor Africans. And that's a tougher nut. You see, the middle class is always fickle because the more successful people become, the more selfish they tend to be. And so you will find the Black middle class tend to be more about themselves than the group, than the race. So it's relatively easy to palm them off. when it came to the poor blacks, they tend to be much more difficult because they tend to be more loyal politically. They tend to be more group oriented. But they're poor. They're poor. And $40,000 makes a whole lot of difference to a poor household. And so you target them with these small sums of money. And usually that poor people would say, good boy, I can take the money, but I'm going to vote APNU, you know? They're smarter than the middle class. The working class, you know, the poor blacks tend to be, poor people generally tend to be much wiser because of their experience of poverty. So some of them figure they can, look, I can take these people money and I'm going to vote differently. But the PPP not stupid. They're not going to give poor people their money like that. They're going to want poor people to give them something. So a lot of them, I understand, have given up their ID cards. Some of them had to photograph their votes and all those kinds of things. So they may start out thinking they can smart the people, but you end up not being able to smart them. So these elections were about Black people, were about African Guyanese. The PPP didn't have to defend its constituency. The PNC didn't campaign in Indian constituency. So the PPP spent a lot of its time and its resources in the Black community. The PNC then had to defend itself. So these elections were about African Guyanese. As I said, if you come from Mars and you land in, nobody will tell you, because the media is not going to say it. The PNC is not going to say it. The PPP, of course, ain't going to say it. But I'm going to say it here. That's what these elections were about. It was about Black people. It was about neutralizing Black people. And what the PPP has done is that it is trying a model. It used the local government election to test a model. And if the model is successful, it is the model they will use for the general election. So if you rig the election in the system, and then you rig the vote outside of the system by buying votes, you are bound to win the election. Good evening to you if you're just joining us. The polls are closed. Kidaki Amsterdam is with me. He was out and about all day today. Good evening, Kidaki.
Good evening, Dr. Hines. Good evening, viewers.
All right. What is it? It's now 7:22. So polls have been closed for an hour and 22 minutes. What have you been hearing in terms of local government elections are always about, I think Kedaki's not ready for me there. He may be ready. No, he's not ready. Local government elections are, of course, about turnout. And let's see here whether he's ready for me. When he's quite ready, we are going to be there. Yes, Kidaki, what have you been hearing? You've been...
What I've been hearing, what I've recognized, I've been in the command center at Buxton, assisting the APNU folks. He told a young assistant I had, I will make her an elections statistician. So I basically was crunching numbers in the command center, along with other things. And based on what I'm seeing, all of the data is nothing, but I I'm hazarding the guess, well, based on the data that I used, that the turnouts weren't great. They did not, most likely did not surpass 30%. At least that is what I was seeing in Buxton. The turnout wasn't great in Buxton. As in some places, I can see in some areas, Nompel, for example, the turnout looked like they were just
But
there.
say in the Indian Guyanese community, so that people understand what you mean.
Yes,
You
in
don't
the
know what
Indian,
umbrella is.
but in the Indian Guyanese community, I've seen what appears to be a slightly higher turnout than the African Guyanese communities. I have some of the complaints which have come in, varying. I think all of the polling places open late, or most of them. Some of them were ill prepared for the polling agents, because I know at least 2 polling stations where the APNU polling agents turned up and they weren't adequate seating for them. They usually, every polling agent is supposed to be given a copy of the folio to verify the persons who are going to vote. In many areas, they weren't adequate folio for each polling agent to be given one. So I know there are several polling stations where folios got to be shared. Those are just some of my observations.
Right. So the turnout was not as great, and local government elections, that is assumed to be the case. Always assumed to be the case. Um, what about nationwide? Have you been hearing anything nationwide?
No, to be honest, I haven't paid a lot of attention to nationwide. But let me tell you this, Dr. Hines, and this is very, very important. I don't know why it actually slipped me. The very skullduggery that the PPP practiced in Strasbourg in the 2020 elections, they were at it again. In this local government elections, some of the guys who were on the ground were able to find out. I'm calling names. I like to call names sometimes because
No,
I'm
no,
not a
no, 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 don't call names.
um,
Don't call names on this program. Don't call names on this program.
very well.
Yeah.
One of the PPP representative from the vigilance area, a back of vigilance police station, um, we operatives on the ground caught him basically transporting people from his place to the Chaspe Primary School. Persons who have voted already, changing clothes, switching ID cards. In Buxton, we found a guy with 2 ID cards. In Buxton also, well, one guy was found with 2 ID cards, and one of the known PPP operatives, female from vigilance, turned up at the Tipperary Hall with 2 ID cards. So the same trickery that they were using in 2020 has actually raised its head again in these local government elections.
And
Um, sorry,
were they
I'm
allowed? Were they
no, they
allowed?
weren't allowed. At least up to Tipperary Hall boxing, they would not have gotten away with that once the seasoned quote unquote campaigners realized what was happening. So they were insulted and so on. And this slipped me. I was about to say something. You can understand. I had a long day from about 5
Right,
this morning.
right.
Maybe it will come back.
Yeah.
That is why I was trying for you not
But
to
if
interrupt
they
me.
tried that in Boston, you can imagine in the Indian communities um, how much of that was tried and how much of that may have been successful.
Yes, certainly. What I wanted, what I was about to say. Perhaps a lot of the viewers would have recognized too that I posted earlier in the day, and I think I saw it on other social media platforms. I posted 3 images of people having gone into the polling stations with their mobile phones, most naturally, and taking out the ballot marked for the PPP with their ID card on it, right? And so the claims that were being made earlier, previous to today, that they were plans by the PPP to pay people big money, as I understand it, or small money in some instances, to vote for them and take out the photographs to submit to them as proof that they voted for them. Election rigging, vote buying, and so on. There is no evidence of that, right? I think there was evidence of it in the military voting, and now there is evidence of it in the wider society voting.
Good. So what you all notice in Boston is, one, the polling places open late. Second, there weren't proper accommodation for the poll watchers. Third, people were doing multiple voting and attempting to do multiple voting. Those things were noted in
And
the
of
box.
course, GCOM, apart from not making adequate preparation in terms of seating for the poll watchers, they did not have adequate, as I would say, statutory documents for the poll watchers. As in the folio, every observer, every poll clerk for the contestants, the what we call them, the candidates, should actually have a folio that they can refer to when persons come in, and the GCOM poll clerk says, well, serial number 24, they should be able to look at their folio for serial number 24 to ensure that the person who is presenting his or herself is the person listed at 24 and the details correspond. That a lot of them did not have the comfort of an individual folio to deal with it. They were forced to share. In some instances, I understand PNC, APNU representatives had to be sharing with the PPP representatives.
Well, sisters and brothers in the audience, you have on the spot report there from Kedaki, Amsterdam, on how things went in that locality, that NDC area, the False Buxton area, and consistent with what we saw in 2020. The attempt at multiple voting and impersonation of identity and so forth. Anything else you want to share with us, Kedaki?
No, what else is there to share? That I know. I believe that the systems could have been better. They could have been tighter organized. I think more work needed to go into getting the vote out in the African Guyanese communities, especially given the fact that we know that the PPP had plans to rig and they were going to rig. I think the candidates really had to put in a lot more work, or should have put in a lot more work. That's from my observation, my vantage point from where I stood. I think that this is a lesson. This is a lesson for me, and hopefully the candidates take it as a lesson as to perhaps, as I might want to see, how not to prepare for any elections against the PPP, knowing that their plan is to rig and rig widely.
Yeah, but let me press you on that point about, you thought the candidates needed to do more. Candidates always have to do more in any election to get voters out, especially in local government elections. But don't you think that the problem is deeper than the work of candidates?
The fact is, there's a deeper problem, but if you are going to overcome the challenges of that deeper problem,
No,
you really have
I
to
hear
do.
you with
That's
that.
all I'm saying.
I
Candidates, I'm saying candidates needed to recognize that there's
no.
a problem of what we might call
I
voter
hear you
apathy,
with that. I hear you
right?
with that. I
And
hear
so they
you
have
with
to
that.
work their asses off. Excuse the language.
I hear you with that. I spent a few hours yesterday in Buxton, and the young man that was killed by the police was buried, and I had to remark that I didn't know there were so many young people in my village. I have never, in recent times, not since 2011, with the APNU campaign, that I've seen so many young people. And it seems that the majority of them were from the south of the village, what we call Bagdam side. And I was blown away. No, a PNC person was with me most of the time. Now, the first thing, I was amazed that a lot of the young people recognized me. And some of them voluntarily came up and offered their advice. A fair share of them indicated that they were not going to vote. That came home clear to me yesterday, and that is why I'm talking about a larger problem. As I said, I think most of them, if not all of them, recognize me. And some of them made it very clear where they recognize me from. Politics 101 was on their lips. That amazed me too, because what it says is that those young people, most of them look to be poorer young people, unemployed and so on. But they recognize me and they recognize Politics 101, which means that they are not as unplugged from politics as we think they are, right? And those who express themselves to me without, I didn't ask them. I heard a couple of things. One, amazingly, I heard, the next time you all get power, you almost learn how to keep power. These are young. They look like 19, 20, 21. And they're looking me in my face and telling me this. More of them young females. The males weren't as talkative, the young females. That's the first advice they give me. The second advice they give me is that you all gotta know how to share out things to you all people when you all get power again. And a few of them say, what happened to the $5,000? I was struck because I've heard that young people not into politics. And the next thing I heard, we don't see nobody. You from Buxton, so we'll see you sometimes. I intended to come and do a live last night with you. But I thought it was better for me to spend some more time in Buxton and learn from those young people about what's on their minds. And they were making it very clear that they weren't going to vote. Make it very clear. They weren't going to vote. One of them said, I know this man is the APNU man. And she friend last year, I know the man is a WPA man. Down to the details. It was a learning experience for me yesterday afternoon. And these, I think, to look to me like mostly poor people children, a lot of them look unemployed and so on. They're from the back of the village. We know that village well, and we know the profile of the village and so on. I left there knowing that the turnout was not going to be great today, because the majority of the people in that village are young people. I didn't know that. I knew that they were the majority, but I didn't know there were so many young people in that place. But I left there partly enthused because all is not lost. That those young people have a sense of politics. If the little that I heard says something to me. Now, it may not be, Buxton may not be the ideal place because I'm from there. And we would assume that if they're scrolling on Facebook and they see a picture with me or so on, that they are likely to click it and listen to what's going on. And I gather that some of the parents tell them to listen whenever we are on, because some of the younger ones, I get the sense, weren't too sure whether I was from Buxton or not. So it may not be an ideal play because they may be biased because I'm from there, and so therefore an interest in what I do or you do, maybe because we are Buxtonians. So I'm very careful not to use that to say this is what obtains throughout the country. But I think it reflects. Anyhow, any comments you have?
Yeah, one of the striking things, Dr. Hines, that you mentioned that a lot of the young people who spoke with you yesterday and so on, were apparently from the south of the village. Up to when in the earlier part of the day when I was doing the numbers, it struck me that the higher turnout at that time of the day was from the south of the village.
There you go.
Right, the south of the village had the higher turnout, and this is Buxton, south of the railway line. I'm telling you about.
Buxton back down side, Friendship back down side, yes.
Yeah, the turnout was high down there. At least higher than what we might call the other areas. So I was pleased and pleasantly surprised, let me say, because that's the area I'm from, and so I'm saying,
yeah.
But guys, I want to ask you a question. We get off, so let me ask you this one: how many of those young people told you that they're waiting to vote you as president? Because I heard a lot of that today. As a matter of fact, one woman told me, I don't know what you and Dr. Hines waiting for. Yeah, I gotta take this thing and run with it.
Well, you know my style, and I get the audience probably picked up from how I very uncomfortable talking myself, and I try as much as possible to make it not so much about me. But I was surprised at the reception that I got from those young people, and the invitation to go down at the back there and to spend more time with them. That's like I said, I mean, I decided not to come and do a live last night and spend some time with them, because that's how I saw it. It was about spending time with them. And as the PNC person who was with me said, but really, they know you. And some of them, we could see them jamming one another and asking if that's Dr. Hines, because I think the thing is that that I look fatter on TV than in person. So I sometimes think that. But yes, I picked up that sentiment. I picked up that sentiment. That part of it is a lack of leadership that they can identify with. And I think that's part of the problem we face on our side of the aisle. It is not that we don't have leaders, but what those young people seem to be saying to me yesterday, it's not leadership that they can identify with. You and I are from the village, and there are other leaders who are villagers, and villagers don't ask much. Sometimes they just want to see you there. Sometimes they just want to see. I remember when I was a kid, it was enough for me to see Guyana, my generation, to see Guyana leaving in the morning to go down to town, and then coming back to teach lessons, and then leaving to go to town, and then coming back just by seeing him gave us a sense of importance. And I got that sense yesterday. And that's why I took that decision that I wasn't going to do a live. I was going to stay there and spend the afternoon and the evening with them. Because, of course, when the funeral finished, they're being in, you know what I mean? And I passed the stage of being in now. But, I thought that I should spend the time there so that they can see one of us there. But yes, the long answer to your question, I picked up a little of that. Kidaki?
Well, it's not my program. I'm not the host. I'm waiting.
I forgot we're not on Guyanese morning time. Good evening to you if you're just joining us. The polls are closed, and I'm sure a lot of you are glued to those places. I don't know when we can expect results as Guyana. We're not going to start getting anything probably until tomorrow. Kidaki, what are you hearing?
I believe because it's local, right? Because it's local, I think we're going to get a sense of who has won their constituency, especially by the end of the night. I think people are already knowing who has won which constituency based on the results coming out of the varying polling stations in the constituency. For example, Buxton constituency 1 is from the seawall to Bagdam side, as we call it, Pandam area, between Sideline Dam and Company Road. You have how many polling stations there? Not a whole lot.
Three. Tipperary.
Right? You have Tipperary, you have the Community Life Fellowship, you have Marcel's M&K.
Marcel place, yes.
That is 3 on the Middlewalk Road.
Right.
Which will take care of
Sideline
Middlewalk.
Sideline to Middlewalk.
Right. If you go to Company, I think some people at Company might have found themselves over at
Friendship Primary.
Yeah. Company Road Primary.
Company Road Primary,
Friendship Primary, Buxton Secondary.
Yeah.
Right. So those numbers are going to be in soon, because I think the average I saw in terms of number of votes at a polling station is about 500 tops. I don't think they were any higher than 500.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and of course, if the turnout is at 20%, right, if the turnout is 20-25%, even if you go to 30% of 500, you're talking about 150-200 votes to count in a polling station.
Right. Well, of course, a lot of people are going to be paying attention to the big races in the municipalities: Georgetown, Linden, New Amsterdam, Bartica, etc. And those might take a little bit longer. Even if the turnout is low, the volume of votes would be higher than, let's say, an NDC, right?
Certainly, yes, because the municipality or municipalities, they're very big populations, right? And so you're expecting that the voting would be more tedious. I mean, the counting might be more tedious there, and so you might have to wait a longer time for the results. My guess is by tomorrow you're going to get numbers, man.
Yeah, I was hazarding the thesis before you came on that in many regards, these elections were about African Guyanese, since the PPP was not forced to defend its constituency. And the PNC paid a lot of attention to the African Guyanese constituencies, and that the PNC, in many regards, found itself defending its constituency. What do you think about that thesis?
It is a fact. These elections, and these elections were certainly about African Guyanese from very many angles. Number one, it is about the PPP attempting to fully dominate African Guyanese space. It is about African Guyanese fighting for survival in their very spaces, right? The reality is, it is something that always bothers me. I've never really been given a proper explanation or an acceptable explanation. Why is it the African Guyanese political representatives don't go into Indo-Guyanese communities and campaign? And even if they do,
no, I can answer that, and I've answered that. I can answer that.
You're going to interrupt my thoughts.
All right, go ahead.
Right, but you find the PPP goes into African Guyanese communities and are very bullish with their presence. right?
But
And so here it is, you're confronted in your own backyard and you really got to fight to stave off this attack. And so more than anything else, it was about African Guyanese.
but
Stave off the attacks on the PPP.
first of all, the PPP going into African Guyanese areas is a recent phenomenon. It's a recent phenomenon, right? There's in any environment of conflict, there are unwritten rules, Mr. Amsterdam. Crossing of the floor is at the top. That has always been the case. Burnham would get people from the PPP leadership to cross over. And at some point in the early, the PPP used to get some black people to cross over and so on at the top. There was an understanding that you would make token appearances in each other's stronghold, but you would not go into each other's stronghold and behave the way the PPP is doing. Look, even in war, they say you don't shoot civilians. So even in war, you have rules of engagement. And in ethnically divided societies, there are rules of engagement. What the PPP has done in this election is that it has broken those rules. So don't wring your head, believe it is something. They're unwritten understanding. Unwritten understanding. Even in your village there, in the days when WPA was strong, the conflict in our village was between WPA and PNC. And there were unwritten rules between us that there's certain things as PNC you don't do, there's certain things at PPP you don't do. You don't go to county high school and talk about PNC. Right? You go and eat your can't drink a thing and you use an aspirin on that day. There are unwritten rules in political competition. And what the PPP has done, they've broken those rules. And I'm arguing that is not going to change tomorrow. So the PNC has to get ready to play rough and tumble from now on. That the PPP hasn't gone into Indian Guyanese areas, unwritten rules. I heard the leader said that they didn't contest the area because Jadio tell the East Indian businessmen not to give them money. That may be so. But even that in itself is breaking the rules. East Indian businessmen knew that you would give, you get some money for the war chest, that you would give 60% to PPP, you give 40% to the PNC. Now it seems that even that rule has been broken. The ethnic balance of power has shifted. If the PNC were to go into Indian areas, they will chase them out. Look at what they did on March 6, 2020. Unheard of. Stoning policemen and all those things. Guyana has changed before you all very faces. Right? If the PPP were to go, the PNC were to go in any hardcore Indian areas, they will chase them out. Because that's what used to happen in the old days. If you went past the unwritten rule, they chase you gangan. That is what happened in your own village when the PPP went there 1 or 2 elections ago. They went to the line top and starting, and what did you all do them? I don't mean you. you all tell them they couldn't speak. The unwritten rules. This time, with all the big mouth the PPP get, then venture the line top. They steady road corner, do the meeting, and then they mistake. So at least they hold the unwritten rule in Buxton, right? But in the other African Guyanese community, no.
A lot of times, talking about the unwritten rule and reflecting on when people used to get gunned eggs and so on. Yesterday, I passed a gathering in one of the streets, and it was a fierce argument and cuss out, as we like to say, between rival groups, PNC supporters and PPP supporters. And it's a burning shame because that fight there, that cuss out and so on, was, over what? Flags.
Yeah.
Somebody removed the PPP flags from in front of the business place and some other part of the village. And, PPP candidates went and brought police to lock up
Yes.
the fellow villagers, And
Yes.
I passed and I simply said, I want y'all to understand that after these elections, we all will have to live in the same village. We all will have to live in the same village. And I brought that up to say to our villages in particular. I like to talk about Bostonians. Y'all be very careful. Dr. Hines talk about this unwritten rule. Y'all be very careful you don't overstep the line. Black people got a way of wanting to prove that they could be the best of slaves and slave catchers for the PPP. Y'all be very, very careful because they say, Quendele and they say, want to measure right, just measure over. And we live in these communities. Remember that should anything happen to any of you, it is the people in this community that will have to run to your rescue.
Yeah.
You must
I think villages like Boston will work the story out. You know what I mean? I think that PPP thing in Boston, villages like Boston and so on, is not sustainable.
I
not
heard a
in
story today.
yeah.
I mean, I'm sharing because some people, I see somebody say I sound depressed or I look depressed. I'm simply tired. There ain't nothing in this country that could depress me, especially when it comes to the PPP, right? I heard a story today, and I'm saying this to show people, right, how it is that they are getting caught up in a new form of slavery. Um, some of the candidates from the APNU went to Blena Multilateral and encountered a Bostonian who
You
is a
mean
candidate.
some of the black candidates to the PPP?
Yes,
Yeah,
some
right.
of the African guys, this candidate for APNU
Right.
went
Okay.
to
Okay.
Blena and they met up with a particular African Guyanese candidate for the PPP.
Yeah.
And in their interactions, he said to them, I've been helping out some people to find where they got to vote. Oh, there's another thing I want to point out which happened in these elections, where they got to vote, because they weren't listed at their usual place of vote. But y'all know once my people them they're wrong, I couldn't help them. You hear that nonsense? You're Bostonian. And if the PPP representatives are wrong, you can't assist your fellow Bostonians to find a place of poll. Well, if you ain't a house slave, I don't know what you be. I'm being very honest, right? And this is what I want to note to you when I said I have to point out something else that happened. There were some serious, what should I say, occurrences of gerrymandering, right? People who are normally supposed to vote at polling places in Buxton, right? Jem Moffat's place, for example, were taken and thrown at polling places in Traspay, Bladenall, right? And basically what they did there is reduce the voting strength at these quote unquote Bostonian polling places, and where you know that you will have a clear victory and margin of victory and so on, and send them to Traspay, right? Where the votes become, what should I say, insignificant, knowing that Traspay is predominantly Indo-Guyanese, and the PPP are likely to win in those areas. So they just take Bostonians from where they are, where the numbers would mean something, and just throw them among the lot there so that those votes become insignificant. And that is why I believe the Carol Joseph case was very, very important, with the gerrymandering of the boundaries and shifting of people and so on. But of course, that's water under the bridge, as we would say.
Yeah. It's a way of nullifying the importance of your vote, because if if you if you take votes from an APNU quote unquote stronghold and you put them in a PPP stronghold, you're giving the PPP person a chance in that APNU stronghold to get past the post force. Oh boy, our politics. Yes, thank you all for joining us tonight. Tonight, I know you all are shopping around to see where the results are going to be coming in from and so forth. And so we're having a little chat here on what are some of the lessons we can take away from these elections. Like I said, these elections are symbolic. Nothing is going to change tomorrow in Georgetown or Linden, and that is assuming that the PNC holds on to those places. Nothing is going to change. The government, the central government, is going to continue to starve them of funds. They're not going to be able to provide this representation and the services to you. So in that sense, the elections are basically symbolic. But the elections are also important. They are symbolic, but they are also important because elections are about power struggle. It's about struggle for power. And power can be actual power. It can be hard power. It can be soft power. It's about power. And if you control 4 municipalities, it may not be hard power, but certainly soft power. You see? So it's about power. And I think that these elections were about the PPP testing a model that it hopes to put in place for the next general election. The PPP intends, of course, to rig the system, which I'm sure it did today, as it did in 2020. But it very intelligently is not depending on just the rigging in the system. It is prepared to buy votes. And vote buying is really against the law. It's really against the law because you're really intimidating people. So the PPP is adding another dimension to its rigging arsenal, not just rigging in the system, but also buying votes and use. I saw a quote somewhere today from Barry Jagdeo. He said, yeah, you know, when you're in government, you get the advantage, you get government vehicle and so on. He accepts that. It's illegal, but he accepts it as normal. So the PPP has the advantage of incumbency. They have control of the purse. They have control of government resources. They control the electoral architecture, and then they're going to buy votes. It's a widened arsenal. And I'm saying between now and the next election, the opposition really got to do some serious fighting. They say it's not reasoning, you know. This is fight. Fight. And I hope you all tell the PNC that all them posing for picture that I see, and every time I go on Facebook and I see all the pictures who posting at Marble Room and posting this way and smile up, I suck my teeth. Because I said these people don't realize they're warring. They think this is a play. The optics that you should be putting on Facebook for people to see is fighting optics, not beauty contest. But alas, I see some of the PNC leaders posing, and what a wonderful time in a war. I don't think all your leaders, certainly the ones in the PNC, realize that this is a war. They're playing, and they don't realize it's a war. Kidaki Amsterdam, you're about to say something.
Yeah, what was I about to say? I was about to say, first and foremost, let me make it clear. I expect every candidate in the Buxton area to win their constituency. I certainly expect that. I expect every candidate to win their constituency. And while I hear you say that these elections are symbolic.
No, I said symbolic but important. Don't do like the
Okay,
PPP. Don't like the
symbolic,
PPP. Only looking
symbolic
to
but
argue what's there.
important. I have
Yeah,
always stressed, and I want to continue to stress,
yeah.
that NDCs, municipalities, will get their due from the PPP or any other government when the residents of those NDCs and municipalities are prepared to stand behind and alongside their elected officials. It is not good enough to just elect representatives to the NDCs and municipalities, the councils and so on, and just sit back and say, well, they have to deliver this service and that service. Especially that we have a vindictive central government that is going to squeeze the hell out of them to make them look bad and make them fail and cause you sufferation for the poor provision of services because they don't have the resources. Guyanese have to come to the point where they are prepared to stand alongside and behind their political representatives at these councils and municipalities, local government councils and municipalities, and challenge central government to do what is required of them. And until such time, Dr. Hines and others will say these elections are symbolic but important, right? Until such time, let us stop seeing them as just symbolic. These people who elect to these councils are our representatives, but they can be as strong as we are standing with them.
Brother Kedaki, lovely speech. If you were a lecturer at a university, you would get high marks. What percentage of people vote for those representatives? That's the first thing. That's the first thing. That's the first flaw in what you're saying there. The people have signaled no confidence in the representatives already. So you're asking people.
I think the people have signaled no confidence in the system.
Let me finish.
I think the people have signaled no confidence in the system.
There you go. There you go. Now you're beginning to talk. It is a system that has to change. Not people have to line up behind their representatives.
How do you change the system?
You have to pass legislation. The APNU passed local government legislation. They passed local government legislation. But that local government legislation did not go to the heart of the matter. It did not change the balance of power between central government and local government. And that's where you have to go. You have to put systems in place in which people will have confidence in.
Dr. Hines.
And if you empower the local government, I study local government in other countries, and where the local governments are empowered. You take, for example, the City of London. You think the central government can push around the Mayor of London? No, because the City of London is empowered.
The
relationship between the central government and local government has to change. Local government has to be empowered.
Welcome, Vikram Bharat. I see Vikram Bharat is on the program. Nevertheless, this is what I'm saying to you, Dr. Hines. No changes will come unless the citizens are prepared to fight.
Unless the leaders are prepared to lead. Unless the leaders are also prepared to lead.
Yeah, the system will not change unless the people who are affected by the system are prepared to fight.
And in which the leaders,
for example, the very GCOM that we keep
are prepared to lead.
The GCOM that we continue to cry out for changes to take place, right? In 1990, it was a different GCOM. It was the people standing alongside and behind their leaders and fighting for change that resulted in the structure of GCOM.
You may have forgotten. It was leaders who were prepared to make sacrifices and people followed them. I've been around. It was a different kind of leadership.
Well, Dr. Hines, I'm going to indict you here, because the fact is, if we recognize, or if you recognize that the leaders are not leading and fighting as they ought to, you come from an era of fight. Then you just have to step up. Everybody has been calling for you to step up.
Step up what?
Step up and fight.
And so you're telling me I'm not fighting? You're telling me I'm not fighting?
You're fighting, but maybe not hard enough. Show the leaders how to fight.
I can't show the leaders how to fight. That's not something you can show people how to do.
I hear you, sir.
Kidaki, sometimes you all put up too much pressure on the people, you know, and there's nowhere in the world where people have stood up without inspiring leadership. Either they throw up their own leadership or leadership volunteer. But leadership is as important as the followership. You have to inspire people to follow you. It's as simple as that. To ask people to just rise up and what? Don't put too much of thing on people, man, and let the leaders off the hook. Let the leaders go and pose on Facebook and telling people that they must struggle.
I never suggest that. I said stand behind and alongside. So it's open to interpretation, but that's my position. Unless the people really stand with their leaders, I don't see now much change.
And unless the leaders stand with their people, unless the people and their leaders stand together, that's how changes come about. All right? The people, in my understanding, are always more ready than their leaders are.
Let me make an announcement on this program.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am prepared to stand alone. I'm prepared to run for president of this country alone, you know. Right? Because I believe we can get a change like that. A president that is not aligned to any political party, but can pull cabinet members from all over the place. I think I will run for president of this country.
Is there you want to push me to say I gotta run for president?
Y'all seem not to want to take up the challenge.
There have been many wannabe presidents before, and they've passed on to the great beyond. Not dying. They've passed on to the political dumb people because all they want to do is to be president. No, that's not the answer, brother. And you know better.
No, you're offering leadership where there seem none.
You know better than that. You know better than running for president. Is that what gets me in the position that we in now? Too many people want to run for president. And only one president you can get, you know. Too many people want to run for president, and they don't want to serve people. Yeah, that's our problem. Kiraki Amsterdam and David Hines here tonight, looking at today. We await the results tomorrow night. By this time, we should be able to get some results. So I just want to thank you all for showing up tonight. I know it's not a night that people show up in large numbers for class, but you all still show up. So I'm gonna see you all tomorrow night. Tomorrow is June 13th, the anniversary, 43rd anniversary. Yes, Dr. Hines, charismatic leaders are few and far between. I agree with you. I agree with you, Romanita. Right? Not everyone who cry, Lord, Lord, shall be enter the kingdom. Yeah. Yes, tomorrow is the 43rd anniversary of the assassination of Dr. Walter Rodney. It's a sacred day for the WPA. And we are going to be having a 2-hour program tomorrow night, Politics 101, reflecting on the contributions of Dr. Rodney and try to see what we can tease out from his example and put it to use in our struggle today. So tomorrow night, a 2-hour program reflecting on the life of Dr. Walter Rodney. And of course, whatever results we have by then, of course, we're going to be bringing it to you. I may go live. I may go live sometime during the day, depending on what kind of results we have. So thanking you all of you.
I'll be on in the morning. By then, you should start getting some results. Guyanese morning time. So
Right.
remember to join me in Guyanese morning time at 6 o'clock. And whatever results are available, we certainly will share them.
Thank you. So thank you all for coming on to Politics 101 tonight. See you all tomorrow. Tomorrow morning on Buxton and Guyanese morning time. I may do a midday show. And then, of course, in the evening, our regular Politics 101, reflecting on the life and contributions of Dr. Walter Rodney. See you all tomorrow.